time to move on to the topic of smart meters, Lindsay. Now, I know you've prepared some material for us today to do with smart meters and how they give us an indication of where we're going with general surveillance in this country.
Yes. I'll just start reading a little bit of stuff that I put down first so that you get a background on what I'm on about. I've long considered that I've had concern about the control of our technology, that everything seems to have backdoors. Now, there's a monitoring by Boeing and most probably other manufacturers of aircraft, and they supposedly, the controls can be taken over and flown from the ground. Now, much of this evidence came to light in the aftermath of 9/11 by the engineers investigating the episode. Our modern vehicles, including some makes of trucks, can have the engine stopped via satellite, and in the near future, if they can't already, I think some of them already can. Now, I've also got a quote here from the EU, and I'll have the link to this down below in the website. The EU is considering mandatorily equipping of all cars sold in the Union with devices, which would allow police to remotely disable engines according to leaked documents. If the plan goes ahead as planned, European law enforcers will be able to stop fugitives, suspected criminals, or even speeding drivers with a simple radio command from a control room. The technology is part of a 6-year development plan by the European Network of Law Enforcement Technologies, or NLETS, a working group for police cooperation across the EU, reports the Telegraph. Cars on the run can be dangerous for citizens. The newspaper cites a document leaked by state power watchdog Statewatch. Criminal offenders will take risks to escape from a crime. In most cases, the police are unable to chase the criminal due to a lack of efficient means to stop the vehicle safely, it says. So it's on the EU are thinking at it. I suspect that with the new technology in cars, now they could probably do it now if they wanted to anyway, but they're certainly talking about bringing it in the EU. Yep. I have worries about backdoors into our computers, especially Intel, which is manufactured in Israel. Microsoft has been wide open to virus and worms for years. As a result of that, I've long since gone to Linux, and I've got an AMD operating system, and I've not suffered a worm or a virus since. Well, that I know of anyway. But that does not mean that I'm confident about AMD and Linux, and that they're both completely free from backdoors and open to, or open to intelligence services. One of Silicon Valley's most respected technology experts, Steve Blank, says he would be surprised if the US National Security Agency was not embedding backdoors inside chips produced by Intel and AMD, two of the world's largest semiconductor firms, giving them the possibility to access and control machines. Now, I've got the link to that so people can find it when they go on the web. Our bank accounts and ATMs are subject to immediate closure for a month or more, and we can be required to bail in or help the banks out. The banks closed their doors during the Great Depression for a month, and in Australia, people were willing to sell their bank books for 10% of their value just to have some money to buy food. So there's a precedent for this. They can do it, and they will do it. And if you're concerned about this, just feed bank haircut or bank bail-in into Google, and there's a myriad of stuff on it. Power supply can be killed, as happened in New Zealand. On the 20th of February 1998, central Auckland was plunged into darkness. The failure cost businesses about 300 million New Zealand dollars and resulted in central Auckland being without electricity for 66 days until an emergency overhead power line could be reconnected to the city. And that was the longest peacetime blackout in history. Now, I remember that happening at the time and remember thinking, are these people testing us to see how far they can drive a community before they push back? Now what worries me is that we've got smart meters coming to a home near you. They can monitor and report by wireless signal the equipment you use in your home, the amount of television you watch, and no one has yet convinced me that they cannot externally cause a short to be used to burn down your home. Now, watch this technology research and shocking explanation below of smart meters. Now, this is I'm referring to a video on YouTube and a website that we'll have on on the net. I've long wondered how to escape Brisbane, the city that we live in, if things come bad. The city could be burnt to the ground if we had smart meters. They could trigger houses all over all the suburbs and burn it. Vehicles be stopped in their tracks, so you couldn't escape with your vehicle if you're planning, oh, well, I'll get out into the country. No, they could stop your cars. Also, phone services could be killed and water be cut off, and we really would be at their mercy. Now, I might sound like I'm over the top, but just when I hear from people that went through the Great Depression, I don't think I am that far over the top. Okay, I'll throw it back to you and see if you've got anything to say on all that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Lindsay. Your concerns are valid. You know, one of the main goals of the New World Order, obviously, is to have us dependent on them and to set up a smart grid where technology is controlling our lives. You know, they want to push for a digital currency that they can turn off at any time. Microchips used to be something of conspiracy legend that used to be demonized. Now people are actually implanting microchips for simple things as controlling their iPhones and, you know, access to their house and even for healthcare over in the United States it was rolling out. So the concern that if whatever's coming, whether it's a collapse, whether it's a war, whatever's coming, whatever the end goal of the New World Order is, your concerns are very valid that if we do have smart meters on our house and all of these devices in our cars and everything, we could be trapped in this city, and it's something scary. Mick Raven at conspiracyoz.com and the Conspiracy Oz podcast has covered smart meters for a long time, and in his back catalogue he's expressed his concerns about smart meters, and it just seems like this is just yet another step in the Orwellian nightmare of control over in this country, and it's only going to get worse from here, Jono.
Yeah, and Lindsay, let me tell you that Silver Slave 333 in the live chat says that you're not over the top at all with your concerns, and I agree with him. I don't think you're being over the top at all. I've got a few points to make on this. The first one is to do with the microchips, and during the week, Free Radio Revolution, Jeff C. put out a video to do with the fact that these chips are here right now. They're here today. They're being promoted within companies. There's this... I mean, a lot of people think, oh, the microchips, what, do you think they're going to come and microchip us all? No, it's never going to be like that. They're going to find more insidious ways to get us to all adopt to the microchips. And one way to do that is to do it through companies, to say, hey, if you're going to want to work for our company, we've got a policy where if you have a microchip, you'll get cheaper coffees or you'll get free coffees or whatever. Just volunteer for this little chip that goes between your thumb and your finger. And GFC put out a video where they're doing this in a company where people within the company, I think it might be in America, although it might be a Swedish-based company that's doing this, going around to companies and letting them, if they want to do so, get chipped, you know, for the purpose of working at the company. And that's one way to do it. Not to go door to door and force people to get chipped. Let them do it voluntarily through their place of employment. So I'll link to that video in the info box or in our website, AusRoundtable.com, after the show. The second point I wanted to make was to do with Linux, Lindsay. I have to tell you, it's embarrassing for me, the fact that I've got this mate of mine called Lindsay, who's you know, a couple generations older than me, and he's using Linux, and here I am still using Windows. And I keep needing to eventually make the change to Linux. I'm sure one day I will, and I'll have a much older, wiser man in Lindsay helping me out make that move. My final point is to do with this remote car disabling, and I think that if the powers that be get their way, we'll eventually get to a point where if you run a red light on a freeway, your car will just lock you inside the car and drive you to the police station. If they get their way, that's where we're headed. But more seriously, when it comes to the surveillance, I guess the point that I take from what you were reading out to us before, Lindsay, was the fact that this is multifaceted. Whether it's microchips in our cards or in our hands, remote locking devices for our automobiles, smart meters at our house, more and more they're getting more access, not just to our data, but to how we live our lives. And you have to ask, why? What's the bigger agenda here that's at play? And I think for anyone who has the eyes to see, it's very clear where they're going with all of this. Lindsay, what say you? Yeah,
I agree. And some of the links we'll put in, particularly by this, I have difficulty pronouncing his name, Zbigniew Brzezinski. In some of his books, he details exactly where they're going. There also is a link here to a Vimeo video, and they set it out. This has been on for 20 years. These people have had this coming for a very long time, and you'll see the details on it. So you become more open to it if you see where it's come from. Like when I first heard about smart meters, I thought, oh, you know, this has just come out of nowhere. Suddenly they were talking about putting them in Victoria. But when I went into it, I found, oh no, this has been on the go for a very, very long time in America and elsewhere.
Yeah, definitely. And it has been ongoing since the start of the 20th century here in Australia. And I learnt that through the work of Dr. Frank Kane down from the University of Sydney, his work on ASIO and intelligence. And just to give a little bit of a background about how this smart meter grid is being added on to what we've already got, especially for some Australian listeners that are unaware just how Orwellian the country has become, I'll read out an article from TOTTnews.com, my website, entitled Erosion of Privacy in Australia, Basic Facts You Need to Know. Now, this was a very important article at the time. Obviously, since then, the anti-terrorism legislation, all of these draconian measures in the wake of ISIS have originated. But even before that happened, we were living in a draconian state, and it did come to light to the general masses from the prison program, the Edward Snowden leaks, whatever you want to think of Edward Snowden isn't really the point. It's what was leaked, and it was leaked. The prison program, Australia was a massive part of that, and that we have been contributing to the Five Eyes Alliance for a long time. That is the US, the UK, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. We have 6 primary intelligence organisations in Australia. Obviously, we have ASIO and ASIS, the Australian Secret Intelligence Service and the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation. They're widespread, known by most people here in Australia. But we also have the Office of National Assessments, the Defence Imagery and Geospatial Organisation, the Defence Intelligence Organisation, the Australian Signals Directorate, which obviously used to be the DSD, a lot of people know about that, and the Defence Security Authority. So we have all of those that regularly conduct domestic and international intelligence operations in Australia. Now, there was identified 4 facilities in the country that contribute to key intelligence operations. There's Pine Gap outside of Alice Springs, which many people know about, and 3 Australian Signal Directorate facilities all around the country that contribute to the NSA's collection program, codenamed X-Keyscore. Now, an interesting fact is currently on per capita basis, the Australian government is 18 times more likely to intercept telephone calls than the United States government, and that's from the Sydney Morning Herald. And even more disturbing, these government agencies access telephone and internet data records an astonishing 250,000 times in 2012 without even recording why and when these intercepts have taken place. Now, government agencies here in Australia can access your telephone and internet data records without a warrant from a judge. This includes state and police agencies like the Australian Taxation Office, Medicare, etc. So that's where the data retention debate's coming from. It's not that you need, it's not that they need access to monitor us. They have all the access that they need in the world. It's to store the data. ASIO has obviously increased 62% since its inception. Has a budget of $350 million today, from 12 employees when it started to 1,800 professional spies now. Here in Australia, law enforcement agencies can legally claim that a person is committing an act of terrorism if they are someone who, quote, destroys trust and spreads fear and paranoia. Now, what kind of a bullshit loose definition is that, where if you destroy trust and spread fear and paranoia, you can be convicted of an act of terrorism here in Australia? That's absolutely ridiculous. And now this article goes on. I'll leave a link in the description at AusRoundtable.com. It's a lengthy article, but this is from my own personal research and piecing together documentaries that I've been making. But we have been living in an Orwellian state for a long time here, Jono.
Yeah, indeed. And I do recommend people go and check out TOTTNews.com, because some of the articles you put together clearly have so much thought and effort go into it. They're well linked, well resourced, well referenced, so much more information than you'll get in a newspaper. And yet people turn the newspaper from page to page, and it's all propaganda. There are people out there like yourself who are happy to put the information there, but it's useless if people don't go and read it. So please, listeners, if you haven't already, go and check out TOTTnews.com and see some of Ethan's work for yourself. It's fantastic stuff, and it should be getting shared. Now, I want to read out a few of the comments from the listeners. The story up says that 5 million smart meters in Canada were removed because of safety concerns, and this ended up costing the Canadians billions of dollars. I hadn't heard that one, so that's given me something to go and look into. I might report on that one next week. Rosash says that he thinks the powers that be are working with the big YouTube channels to dumb down the masses, and I've got no doubt that that's the case. I mean, think about some of the crap that you see on YouTube that's promoted to the masses that they love. And then you've got other shows and other channels like Team Wake 'em Up and Red Pill and Free Radio Revolution who are spreading the truth, you never hear of them unless you find them yourself.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a coincidence. Robo Spirit says that he heard a woman say to her daughter in the shops recently not to use Flybuys because they just use that to collect data on us. And I love hearing stories like that. I mean, it's not just people like us who are doing this. There are many people out there who are concerned about the creeping surveillance state. And it's always pleasant when you hear that people are out there saying this. The more that we talk about it, the better. So thanks, Robo Spirit, for that one. And Mr. 79 Sav says that when he goes to the shops and they ask him if he has Flybuys, he says no. And they're in shock. And I've never thought of it that way, but the same thing used to happen to me back when I used to shop at Coles and Safeways. They'd always ask, do you have Flybuys? And you'd say no. And they did have a weird look on their face. And I guess it's because, Ethan, most people do use Flybuys.
I didn't, and I always get that look too. It's I'm not going to subscribe to that notion of using those at all.
Hey, Lindsay, are you a big Flybuys fan, mate?
My father. I say this to the girls behind the counter, and because I go to the same Coles, from time to time, they get to know it, and I have to stop after a while because I bore them to death. But my dad used to say, to me, if somebody tries to give you something, put your hands in both your pockets because they're going to be trying to rob you. That pretty much sums up Flybuys. They're not going to give you something.
I would love to go to the shops one day just for half an hour or so, just to see how many people are using Flybuys. It never occurred to me, but I guess probably the majority do use it. I've never really looked into it until I got that comment there from Mr. 79 in the chat. Now, that's the conversation on the the surveillance state, boys. Do you have any more points to add before we move on? Lindsay, I'll throw to you.
Yeah, they're probably 1,000 points, but that's as much as I can do today.
For me, it's just really educate yourself on intelligence here in Australia. Dr. Frank Kane, as I've said, he's got a lot of good books out, categorising Australian intelligence all the way back to the First World War when we joined the British Alliance in terms of sharing data and whatnot. And I encourage people to check out TOTTnews.com. On the right side of the homepage, you can click Intelligence Archive, and it'll go to an archive of articles that categorize intelligence here in Australia. So I definitely encourage people to go see that and say hello to ASIO whenever you make some videos.
We forget sometimes we have a big international audience, and we've been talking about Flybuys like it's this normal thing. One of the questions in the chat has said, what is Flybuys? Now, Ethan, I want to throw to you on this one. Can you give a basic explanation to our international listeners who aren't really familiar with the system, what Flybuys is?
I honestly couldn't. I don't know what they are. I've never looked into it.
Lindsay, do you want to give the international audience a basic idea of what a Flybuys card is?
Well, what I'm led to believe is if you buy something from a whole range of businesses, like one of our major retailer, Coles, and you can get it at petrol stations or whatever, everything that you buy on your card goes onto this Flybuy card, which adds up. Now, my understanding is that you get very few points for you spend $1,000, you get very few points, but then you can use those points towards buying a free trip in a plane somewhere. That's my understanding of it. But I've only ever...
That's basically right. And I'm sure that in America and other countries they have similar programs. They just give them different names. But it's just like a shopping rewards card, I suppose.
Yeah.
And it's never even occurred to me to sign up for one. And in a way, I guess... I've grown up. I've known what Flybuys are since I was a kid. I remember as a kid, I would see ads on the TV saying, double Flybuys rewards days or something. If you shop on a certain day, you get double rewards, or things like this.
Yep.
I guess it's never really occurred to me that I've grown up in a time of mass surveillance of what you're shopping with, because that's exactly what Flybuys is. I'm not saying that's what it was started for, but if you're going to use the same card to shop at every shop, whether you're using cash or credit, then they have a complete log of exactly where you've shopped. It's never even occurred to me that Flybuys has for my entire life been compiling data on what people do and where they shop, and it's only been this conversation that's made me realize, wow, I've actually grown up with that. I've never used it, but I've grown up in a society where that is common. I mean, that's how far this whole surveillance or tracking of what you do has gone, that even to someone like me, even though I don't use Flybuys, it's just seemed normal, but it's really not that normal if you think about it.
Yeah, well, I haven't thought of it before that either. I knew it had something to do with flights or whatnot, but you had to spend a ridiculous amount of money to get it. But it didn't ever occur to me that, yes, it is tracking where you shop, what you do. It's just another way to reveal information to the state. People reveal so much more information than they believe they do, especially with smartphones, that here in Brisbane in the CBD, they propose that they want to track visitors' movements to give an idea of where people shop and where they go and who are tourists and who are not. It's just these incremental things that you don't realise, but they're all adding to this Orwellian nightmare.